Some of the mistakes in this video that I'm going to help you avoid will save you time, save you money, and give you a better experience in Singapore. So please don't make these mistakes and enjoy your visit to Singapore instead. The first mistake that I often see tourists make is thinking Singapore is cheap. Singapore has a reputation for cheap food and cheap transport, and I've made videos before that show some of the cheaper ways to get around Singapore, but a common mistake I see tourists make is thinking that Singapore is a cheap city to visit, particularly compared to nearby destinations like Bali or Bangkok or Malaysia. And while some parts of the city can be cheap, it can be easy for tourists to be underprepared for the cost of the city. Remember that Singapore was recently ranked 5th wealthiest in the world. Accommodation is the biggest expense I see tourists unprepared for, and top tier hotels can cost well over $500 a night or even more. Even budget friendly options that I typically recommend to tourists can cost over $150 plus per night. As an aside, you'll see this plus often attached to prices in Singapore. It means that the price is quoted without taxes or service charge, and to calculate the actual price you need to add 10% service charge and then 8% GST. Though I often find it easier to add 20% as the sum is easier to do in my head. If you want more helpful tips like this, hit that like button and let me know. Some of the ways I've helped tourists save money in Singapore include not spending on the hotel breakfast. Hotel breakfast can cost $30 plus, but instead you can take a local breakfast for $6. You can also take the MRT or a bus when traveling around the inner city. Singapore taxis are still cheaper than many Western countries, and I still recommend them as the best way to get from Changi Airport to the city, but I found visitors traveling short distances around the central area can save a lot of money by avoiding taxis thanks to a $3 surcharge and the likelihood of getting stuck in traffic. Save the taxi rides for the longer distances, such as going out to the zoo or the airport. Another money saving option is to try local coffee rather than ordering a latte or a cappuccino or something from Starbucks. If you're like me and want that kick in the morning, try ordering iced kopi C kosong. This means iced coffee with evaporated milk and no sugar. I often find the regular Singaporean coffee is too sweet. So the second mistake I see tourists make is not watching out for traffic. While I was preparing this video, I sat in a cafe in a popular tourist area watching visitors contend with a busy intersection and the rain at the same time. Singapore has an interesting intersection design where cars are allowed to turn into the pedestrian crossing while the pedestrians have a green light. This can be a little confusing at first if you don't come from another city that has this rule, but here are a few things to remember. A countdown timer will show you how much time is left for you to be allowed to cross. Once this timer is finished, the cars will have right of way. Make sure that you finish crossing in that time. If there's only a few seconds left and the cars have started to use the crossing, it might be safer just to wait for the next cycle. And if you do start crossing partway through a cycle, try making eye contact with the drivers queuing up for the turn. This will help you figure out if they saw you and whether they will give way to you or not. Most Singaporeans are friendly and courteous when driving, but the driver might not see you when he's doing his turn. Alternatively, many busy roads have footbridges and tunnels nearby to help you cross. These are also covered, offering you a way to cross the busy road in the shade or sheltered from the rain. Unfortunately, the next mistake I see too often in visitors is breaking the law. Thankfully, this doesn't come up too often, but bear in mind that you are in a different country and need to respect their laws and how they're enforced, even if it's different from your home country. Please don't get too stressed by this though. Singaporeans are friendly and accommodating people, and if you do accidentally break a rule, the authorities would rather educate you than punish you. Some of the common rules I see tourists break include having something to eat or drink on the MRT or bus, jaywalking, or littering. Even the famous no chewing gum rule is more about not littering or dirtying the city rather than about chewing the gum itself. Breaking one of these rules will result in educational scolding and a request to stop or clean up your mess rather than a real punishment. The big ones I see visitors get in trouble for are graffiti, drugs, or getting drunk and starting a fight. Please don't do these, it's not worth it. The next common mistake I see is not preparing for the weather. Singapore has two weather patterns to prepare for: rain and heat. Thankfully, Singaporean weather is very predictable, and most of the year it will either be hot and sunny all day and remaining hot at night, hot during the day with a sudden rainstorm in the afternoon and then slightly cooler but very humid at night, or raining all day. Some of my tips for surviving these weather patterns include bring an umbrella. It's not often windy in Singapore, and an umbrella will offer better protection from the rain than a raincoat. It will also give you some shade from the sun if it gets too hot. You might also need to adjust your schedule for the rain, so when it rains a lot, it can be very hard to travel around and do things, and there will be more traffic, more people trying to get a taxi, and the taxi don't want to drive on the street anyway, and you'll probably get wet simply from crossing the street. Stay somewhere dry and wait until the rain eases a bit before heading out. Another tip is to dry off using an air conditioner. Because of the high humidity, clothes, carpets, and anything else that gets wet tends to go moldy. It doesn't really dry properly, so air conditioning will dry the air and reduce the chance of smells developing or mold growing. Also, avoid walking around too much until you adjust to the climate. My brother visited Singapore recently and was really excited to go out at night and try a nearby restaurant for dinner. It wasn't a long walk, but by the time he returned to the hotel, he was exhausted from having to walk around in the heat. And this was at night when it's cooler to move around. It takes a few days, but you can adjust to the heat and humidity, and adjusting will make it easier to walk around outside. Do avoid walking around and overexerting yourself in the sun until you've had a chance to adjust, though I did just read a theory recently that said you should continue to jog or exercise outside in the heat and humidity to speed up the adjustment process. Take care though, and stay hydrated. The next common mistake I see is not going out at night. Thanks to a busy work schedule and the heat of the day, most Singaporeans like to go out and have fun at night. So restaurants, bars, hawker centers, and the like all come alive at night when the weather is cooler and people can walk around and enjoy. Too often I see tourists, and I'm looking at my fellow Australians here, wake up at sunrise and try to fit in as many activities into the day as possible, have an early dinner and then go to bed. You miss out on a lot of fun things in Singapore if you do this, and you'll probably end up suffering from the heat as well. Singapore really comes alive at night, so please don't neglect this time. Another common mistake I see is not realizing that the core central area of Singapore is really walkable, and that sometimes walking is a better option than taking a train. This was a mistake I often made when I first visited Singapore, and I still do make it occasionally. I was insistent that if a destination was linked to an MRT station, I must use the MRT to reach that station and then go to the destination, even if I was only traveling one stop on the MRT. I saw a family really confused by this recently with the Bayfront and Marina Bay MRT stations. They missed their Bayfront stop for Marina Bay Sands and were debating whether they should catch the train back to Bayfront or not. Thankfully, they decided to walk from the next MRT stop at Marina Bay MRT. This walk can include a lovely view of the city from the Marina Bay Promenade. The Orchard Road area is another good example of where walking can be better than taking the MRT. There are malls and tunnels connecting many of the buildings along Orchard Road, and you might find yourself discovering something interesting by walking through the malls or on the streets rather than catching the MRT around the Orchard or Somerset stations. Remember my other tip though of preparing for the heat? It can get hot if you're doing these walks during the day, though thankfully every mall is air conditioned and often sells ice drinks to keep you cool. If you're interested in how to take advantage of Singapore's fully automatic train system, check out my video here next.